Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Feel free to please be seated. As I was introduced, my name is Bachand, and I'm so excited to be with you this morning. And also a very warm welcome to everyone who's also watching online and will be watching this as a streamline later. And a very special gratitude and word of welcome to Reverend Lisa. This is your first Sunday here, so thank you for welcoming me, and also congratulations to you. Of course, to Deacon Richard for all of your warmth and kindness as well. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I was so looking forward to coming today. You know, it's interesting, as you may have read in the epistle from last week about my coming here, I am a former Catholic priest. I was a priest for 8 years. And as a child growing up in Boston, I used to always have this saying I used to say when I was done with something. I'd say, "Oh, I'll never do that again. I'm done with that. I'm never going to do this." And my father used to say to me, "Brian, never say never. Because sometimes you say never, those are the things that keep coming back." So when I freely resigned as a priest 18 years ago, I said, I will never have to do a homily or be back in a pulpit again. Well, little behold, never say never. I never thought this moment would come again, and it's such a gift. And when your wonderful rector invited me to speak today, because I've been contracted by the parish to help on fundraising, it really was a beautiful full circle moment of coming back in faith, and to be here today and to share a little bit about the journey of faith that I've had and we are having as a community, and where we will be able to help others who are coming into this community. In preparation for today, as I was looking over the beautiful sacred texts, it's been a minute since I've had to prepare for a homily. And I was like, oh, this one is so rich from the Old Testament. This one is so beautiful. The gospel is so rich. And I said, oh, there's everything coming together. But I wanted to focus on two particular words that kind of set the context for our reflection, our prayer as we begin today. And it's when Jesus said to Matthew, "Follow me." Follow me. Can you imagine that moment? You know, it's something that's so powerful, because those words, "follow me," aren't just at that time 2,000 years ago. They're spoken to myself and to you this morning, today. Follow me. When you think about Matthew, he must have been a tough character. I mean, he was a tax collector. I mean, he's not on the VIP guest list, you know, for individuals. Matthew was someone that we don't know how many times Jesus had encounters with Matthew. We don't know how many times that Jesus may have seen him at different times and saw him. And when Jesus said, "Follow me," Matthew didn't make a decision from an intellectual standpoint, or from a moment of saying, oh, if I follow Jesus, this is going to help me to get more clients. This is going to help me to grow my reputation. No. He followed Jesus because he felt something in his heart. To follow is to feel in that love, that you can't put words into it, but there's something there that is drawing you to want to take a step, to step out in faith, not knowing all the consequences. That's what Matthew experienced. And those are the same words for us today, as Jesus says, "Follow me." He doesn't invite us to follow him because we have the perfect bank account, we have the right title, we have the right physique, we're athletic, or we even have the perfect family, which we all know that's not true. Jesus invites us because he sees our gifts, and he also sees our brokenness. He sees the ways that we like to control our fear, our anxieties, our grief, our pain, our heartache. And he says, "Follow me because I love you." And that's the gift that Jesus is inviting us today to reflect upon again, to feel those words. Follow me. Where do you feel it? Where do you feel how that resonates in your body? That's the power of the invitation today. For myself, I'll share just a little bit about my own story and how that relates and brings us in to help you reflect on your story and then it's the story of a community of faith that we are. As I said, I was a priest for 8 years. I grew up in Boston. I'm the youngest of 5 children. I was a massive surprise. My parents never expected me. There's a huge age difference between myself and my other siblings. I'm actually closer in age to my nephews and nieces than I am to my own siblings. So I grew up like an only child in Boston. I grew up in a Catholic family. I was always that child that had that kind of intuitive sense. There was a drawing to empathy, of caring for someone else. So I feel if I had been born into a Jewish family, I probably would have become a rabbi. If I had been born into a Buddhist family, I would have become a Buddhist monk. But I was born into a Catholic family, and that's where my spirituality was nurtured. And so after university, I went to seminary, and I became a priest, and I was a priest for the Archdiocese of Boston for 8 years. 4 years in a huge parish. I did weddings like I could have been a chaplain in Las Vegas because I was always doing them, and I was there, and I loved being part of the parish community until one night I received a phone call from one of the assistant bishops that said, "Brian, can you come in for a meeting on Friday?" And I said, "Sure." I was 31, I was young. I went in, I sat down. There had been rumors that maybe I was going to be sent on to get my doctorate, to go study, to become a professor. But instead, in that moment, I was told, there's a new cardinal appointed from the Vatican, and he's picked you to be his new private secretary or chief of staff. And unless you have any reason to say no, you begin in 2 weeks. And I knew in that moment my life was forever changed. I was young, being groomed for a lot of leadership. The next thing I knew, 2 weeks later, there I am with the Cardinal at the Vatican. There I am 2 months later at the White House. There I am handling all these events behind the scenes. And I was following because I believed that's where God wanted me to be. But when we follow God, He also brings circumstances and events into our life to help transform us, to help our soul see who we need to be, to not live in half of who we are, but in the fullness of who we are. And that's what happened to me. As I was in those moments and at the Vatican, I started to see that this is not the world that I feel I want to be in. And I feel the Lord is trying to draw me in a different way. I wanted to be able to love another person, to stand in my truth. And so I freely resigned, all in great terms, with the support and love of the Cardinal. And all I knew at that moment is I wanted to go to New York City, and that's where I was going to start my life. And I did. And my first job was with the American Cancer Society. I landed in the world of fundraising. I'm going to be honest with you, I had no expertise in fundraising. I don't even know how I got hired as a director at that level. I found out later they hired me because they believed I could cultivate high-end relationships. And so there I am in New York City, learning the business, learning all these new ways of how to be. But what I came to realize that fundraising in that world, which was all about KPIs, meeting goals, being there, and that's just how it was, what they had to do. But I quickly realized at that moment that fundraising really was about relationships. Because when I listened more closely to what people were saying, I realized there was something inside of them that they were following, they wanted to do. And in those moments of being there, I started to realize that fundraising truly was from the heart. It's about love. It's about inviting people and their story into something, into a vision that's greater than themselves. And so in those years of being there, I started to realize that God performs miracles in a way that is so powerful, that fundraising really was the miracle business. It wasn't just about asking for money or receiving. It was about transformation. It was about inviting people into something that could be larger than themselves. That is the power of what I started to recognize, and the power that I started to see, that things were much bigger than we needed to be. In the gospel this weekend, we learned about the miracles that are so powerful. The woman that went up to just touch the hem of Jesus because she had faith. The faith that is there because they believe that there is something greater. When we follow, and I'm sure you've had this in your life, it's not always easy. When we follow and we say yes to a person, when we follow and we say yes to moving to a new country, when we follow and we are taking steps, oftentimes there's things that happen that are highly unexpected, ways that really can break us. But those are the moments that God wants to show his power to bring the super into the natural of our lives. That's the power of what it means to fundraise. And so that's what I want to just share a few minutes with you. You know, I promised I was never a long preacher, and I certainly don't want to take advantage of that today, but I want to just share with you what it means to fundraise. And that's why I feel so blessed to be here at the parish, to be contracted to help on the fundraising. Because fundraising, for me, is about the heart. It is about following and bringing our stories into a community and helping those who are also being called. This year, Emmanuel is going to have a very special campaign. And this campaign is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to focus on the ways that we are helping individuals to be part of our community. Their stories, their faith, their unexpectedness of coming in. And the title for this year's campaign is Human Dignity, No Exceptions. Compassion without borders. Compassion without borders. That's powerful. This year, the focus of the campaign is going to focus on the magnificent Welcome Center for Refugees that takes place here day in and day out. As you welcome people, just like in our first reading, that had to trust to go into a foreign land. They're following because they are believing this is a new path, probably in a way they never ever expected. But they have found hope, they have found love, and they're here to be welcomed. The second aspect is to help, and also are the international programs that Emmanuel so generously serves around the world of helping individuals. This campaign isn't just about, oh, here we go again. Now they're asking for money. What does this mean? No, this is a moment of transformation. It's a moment of love. It's a moment of sharing your story and the power of the story of the community in a new way to that we serve. The campaign this year is, focused with, significant money for the Refugee Center that every year we don't have to come back and keep asking to build stability. It's also for the international support of what we'll be doing for our programs. And it's a way to come and a way to show in faith that everything is possible. Sometimes we think, what's going to happen? What does that mean? There was a significant grant that wasn't granted just recently for the Refugee Center. And in those moments, it's hard because you're hoping to rely on that. But it's also a powerful reminder, like the woman that touched the hem of Jesus. Oh no, if we have faith, there's something much greater that can happen. It's a much more powerful moment. And so that is where we are. And that is the gift of fundraising from the heart as we come in faith. I look so forward to meeting with many of you and having conversations. I look forward to learning even more about the great work that you're doing here. But it's more importantly than that, this is a moment to transform our yes and following to truly let there be a new life as we welcome individuals. As my father always used to say, never say never. And that is the same that Jesus is saying us today. When we follow, never say never, because God's reality is much bigger than we can ever be. And he wants to show that joy, that power in your life, in my life, in the life of the community, and the lives that we will be so privileged to open doors of hope and love to through this beautiful campaign. Thank you all.